When my grandmother passed away, it was a profound loss for all of us. She was a central figure in our family, always bringing everyone together with her wisdom, her stories, and of course her affection. But what no one knew was that my grandmother had decided to do something different this time. She left a legacy for all her grandchildren. It wasn't something huge, but rather something symbolic, a gesture of love and recognition for each of us. Before we dive into this story, tell me, where are you watching from? Put your city or country in the comments and take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel because we have an incredible new story waiting for you tomorrow, made especially for you. For a long time, my grandmother told me that the most valuable inheritance she could leave was not money or material possessions, but the wisdom and values she passed down from generation to generation. I believed this and felt that my share of that inheritance was a reflection of a life of love, respect, and unity. But that view was about to be turned upside down. When my grandmother passed away, everyone seemed so focused on their own feelings of loss that no one seemed to pay much attention to the legacy she had left behind. That is, until the day of the meeting, when they would finally discuss how to divide the inheritance. I, innocent and hopeful, thought it would be a moment of unity, a celebration of our grandmother's memory, and a simple division of what she had left behind. But, as I soon discovered, not everyone in the family felt the same way. The meeting began with a heavy atmosphere, an uncomfortable silence hanging in the air. I could feel the tension in the glances exchanged between family members. My uncle, the oldest and always considered the leader of the family, spoke up. I knew he always liked to position himself as an authority figure, but I never imagined he would go so far in his attempt to control. My heart was racing, not knowing exactly what to expect, and I started looking at the other family members, trying to catch any sign that they were at least on my side. But instead, I found blank, impassive expressions. What was about to happen was not just a division of assets, but a division of what I believed to be the foundation of our family unity. It was then that my uncle, with that authoritative tone he always used when he wanted to impose his will, began to talk about the assets my grandmother had left behind. He mentioned with great pomp the properties, the valuables, and then suddenly said something that took me by surprise, leaving me speechless. Now, as you all know, there is a part of this inheritance that will go only to those who have actually contributed to the well-being of the family over the years. And unfortunately, my name does not fit these criteria. The blow was like a punch in the stomach. I stood there, stunned, unable to understand what was happening. How could I not fit the criteria? What did my grandmother have to do with this? Why was my share being taken away? I tried to understand the words he was saying, but I couldn't make sense of them. How dare he do this? I realized at that moment that the meeting wasn't about a simple division of inheritance. It was about power, control, and manipulation. My uncle, always seeking to assert himself as the head of the family, took advantage of the opportunity to try to exclude me. He, who had always wanted to command and shape family relationships according to his rules, had found a loophole to finally strip me of the part my grandmother had left me. With his eyes fixed on me, he continued, "You weren't there to help when the family needed you most. If it were based on contribution, you wouldn't deserve anything." He said this with a tone of contempt that made me even more uncomfortable. I felt the weight of every word and realized that he was trying to make me look worthless in front of everyone. But the worst was yet to come. Some other family members, such as my cousin and my aunt, began to agree with him, nodding their heads in support. The room seemed to have divided in two. My uncle, the leader, on one side, and all those who followed his blind authority, and me, alone, not understanding how I had reached this point. My anger was growing. I knew I couldn't let this happen. I couldn't just accept that my share of the inheritance was being taken away like this, just like that. But at the same time, I knew that if I fought back, my uncle would use his authority to crush me, as he always had. He knew how to manipulate the situation and the family to his own advantage. I needed to be smarter. This was not the time to react with anger. It was time to act strategically. I knew that if I wanted to reverse the situation, I had to find something stronger than words or direct confrontation. I needed a plan, and that plan was about to be put into action. The following night, I contacted the family lawyer, an old friend of my grandmother's who had always been very respected and fair. Unlike my uncle, the lawyer knew the value of traditions and what my grandmother really wanted for the family. After a brief conversation, he revealed something that could turn the tables. My grandmother had left a secret clause in her will. She knew that some family members might try to manipulate the division of the inheritance, so she had laid down clear criteria for such situations. The clause stated that if there was any attempt to exclude one of the heirs, the division would be revised and the excluded heir's share would be redistributed equally among all the other heirs. In other words, if my uncle tried to exclude me, my share of the inheritance would not only be divided among the others, but everyone would lose part of what my grandmother had left. The clause was there, hidden, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. I was in a position of power now, and I knew exactly how to play it. At the next meeting, I walked in with a smile on my face, but a solid strategy in mind. When my uncle started arguing again, excluding me from the inheritance, I calmly interrupted him. "You knew my grandmother left a secret clause in her will, didn't you?" I asked, looking directly at him. He stopped, visibly uncomfortable, and for a moment I thought he was going to try to dodge the issue, but he didn't. "I spoke to her lawyer," I continued without losing my firm tone, "and if you exclude me, everyone here will have to share my share, and believe me, that won't be good for you." The silence in the room was heavy, almost palpable. Glances began to turn to my uncle, and I saw the look of surprise and panic on his face. He was beginning to realize that things were not going as he had planned. The confidence he had in his position as the leader of the family was beginning to crumble. I continued. "My grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. She didn't want this to become a power game. If that's your game, we'll all lose." I saw the nervousness take hold of him. He tried to compose himself, but it was clear that he was no longer in control of the situation. And that's when the real surprise happened. My uncle, having run out of arguments, changed his tactics. He began to make concessions, proposing that my share be maintained, perhaps in the hope of minimizing the chaos that was taking hold in the room. But that wasn't all. The look of disbelief and defeat in his eyes was the real victory for me. At the end of the meeting, my share of the inheritance was secured. Not only that, but everyone in the room began to question my uncle's behavior. They felt uncomfortable with the way he tried to manipulate the situation, and even those who had previously been on his side began to distance themselves. His power over the family, which he believed to be unshakable, was crumbling, and all this happened because I played the game right, with intelligence and patience. After the meeting, I felt victorious, but also a strange feeling. I knew that at that moment, I had secured my share of the inheritance, but what worried me most was what would happen to my family after all this. I had won a battle, yes, but a war was still to come. My uncle, who until then had been the pillar of authority within the family, was now weakened, and although I knew that my share was secure, part of me feared that the trust between us would never be the same again. The following days were tense. The inheritance was divided, and I was credited with my share, but as I looked around, I realized that family relationships were in tatters. Some family members still felt uncomfortable, as if they had been put in a position where they had to choose sides. Others seemed to admire the fact that I had managed to stand my ground, but there was a strange feeling in the air, a distance between us. The family, which had always been united by our grandmother, now seemed fragmented, each following their own opinion about what had happened. I knew that the inheritance, the money, and the material possessions weren't what really mattered, but for a moment I began to wonder, what would my grandmother have thought to see our family falling apart like this after she was gone? The inheritance, which she wanted to be a symbol of love and unity, was now the spark that ignited a silent war between us. I realized that the lack of communication, the way each of us reacted to the division, showed the true fragility of our relationships. But at the same time, something inside me was growing. I knew the situation was far from ideal, but I had learned something valuable about my own worth. It wasn't just about money or material possessions, but something deeper, the ability to claim my dignity, to be heard, to ensure that my voice had weight, even when authority tried to silence me. That was a moment of self-discovery. I no longer needed to submit to anyone to be respected. I could and should fight for my rights and for what my grandmother had so lovingly left me. And then, as if the universe was challenging me to grow even more, another moment arose. A week after the meeting, my uncle came to see me. His demeanor was different, more withdrawn, almost as if he had accepted defeat. He asked me to have coffee with him, and although the conversation seemed trivial, I knew he had something to say. "I'm not perfect," he began with a sincerity that took me by surprise. I always thought I had control over everything, over everyone, but now, seeing what has happened, I realized that I was arrogant. My mother, my grandmother, always said that the true strength of a family lies in how we support each other. I failed you. I failed everyone. These words, coming from someone who had always presented himself as the boss of the family, were like a breath of fresh air. I didn't expect him to be so direct in his apology. Maybe I was expecting expecting another attempt at manipulation, but somehow he seemed genuine. It wasn't the first time he had apologized, but this time, I felt that he was truly aware of what he had done and the consequences of his actions. It was at that moment that I realized that the true legacy my grandmother had left us was not in the value of her property or material possessions. It was in the lesson she taught us every day about the power of mutual respect, honesty, and true family unity. The inheritance wasn't about what she left us physically, but about what she taught us while she was alive. I didn't know how to respond right away. What he said was important, but it wasn't enough to erase what had happened. However, as I looked into his eyes, I realized that the best thing I could do was not to hold a grudge or use that victory against him, but to reach out and help him reconnect with his family. If he was willing to change, to learn from his mistakes, then I should also be willing to move forward. Life sometimes puts us in difficult situations to test our limits. That meeting, that confrontation over the inheritance, was the biggest test my family had ever faced. But in the end, instead of driving us apart, it brought us together in a way we never could have imagined. My uncle had indeed failed, but he was willing to correct his mistakes, and that meant more than any material possession. I, on the other hand, had learned that fighting for my place in the family didn't mean fighting for possessions, but for respect, dignity, and love. The inheritance, which seemed to be the key to our family's destruction, became a catalyst for healing and reconciliation. And now, looking back, I see that the greatest masterstroke was not what I did to secure my share, but what I learned along the way. That often the true value of an inheritance lies in how it teaches us to grow, to relate better to others, and to never lose our dignity. This was the journey of how the fight for a legitimate right turned into a lesson in respect, dignity, and family reconciliation. But now I want to know, what did you think of this story? Do you believe that the true value of inheritance lies in the lessons we inherit or just in material possessions? Leave your opinion in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone you think needs to hear this message about the importance of unity, respect, and the true meaning of family. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Here, you'll find stories that show how we can learn from challenges and grow through life's difficulties. Want more inspiration? Click on one of the videos appearing on the screen to continue following exciting stories that will warm your heart and change your outlook on life. See you in the next video.